received advice.
Where's the chief?
Then start with this.
Where?
He's right in the back
Oh,
left.
there he is.
Take it from the video when she.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah. Right.
Welcome, everybody, to our regular Board of Trustees meeting for April 11th, 2023. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I want to welcome everybody here. It's great to see so many faces in person. It's a great day for the village, and we have some great announcements and some great appointments to make. And again, I'm really happy to see that everyone is here. So our first appointment, our first resolution is to consider a resolution appointing Police Sergeant Joseph Palladino as Police Lieutenant. Is there a motion to make that appointment? Trustee Sullivan, second Trustee Galen, all in favor? That is done. So can I have the Joseph Palladino come up to the apartment, please? I'll administer the oath. You solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, carry out the duties of police lieutenant, village of Bobsbury, that's the So just before you have
You want the microphone?
before you actually pin it on, I just want to say, tell everyone a little bit about Lieutenant Palladino's background. So Lieutenant Palladino grew up in Yorktown, graduated from Yorktown High School in 2002. He attended Washington Community College and SUNY Empire State College, majoring in emergency management. 2012, Joseph Palladino began his law enforcement career as a corrections officer with the Westchester County Department of Corrections. In August of 2013, he was hired by the Rockford Police Department and assigned to the Patrol Division. He's a loyal and dedicated member of this department. I believe his knowledge of the law and the police department and the village makes him an ideal candidate for consideration for the next lieutenant. Your honor is all yours. Welcome, everybody. Welcome.
Thank you for the board. Chief, thank you for this opportunity. Members of the department, you guys are what makes this such a big deal. Without you guys, there would be nothing, and you are one. Make Bobsbury Police the best police department around. So I look forward to continuing this with you guys, and we'll get started tomorrow morning. I got my wife Stacy here, corner Via, and for putting up with the schedule, the times, not being home on weekends, holidays, all that. This doesn't change that, so don't get too excited.
She does the schedule.
I'm here doing that. I do appreciate it. I have a mother and father-in-law. Harrison, my friend's marrying a parent. That's the whole time I got. Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
So now we have the positions, we have a sergeant position. Now what do we do?
Got to do the motion.
Grab that mic if you
You want to
want.
grab the mic?
So is there a motion to appoint Brian Raffer as sergeant to the Dobbs Ferry Police Department? Trustee Rosen-Asher, second. Trustee Patino, all in favor? That passes unanimously. So congratulations and come on up. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and to carry out the duties of police sergeant of the Village of Dobbs Ferry Police Department to the best of your ability? Congratulations. Stephanie, welcome. I hope you have steady hands. While she's putting it on, let me tell you all a little bit about Brian Raffer, who was born and raised in Dobbs Ferry. His mother, Maureen, and father, Kevin, are both lifelong residents of Dobbs Ferry. Brian comes from a long history of law enforcement. His father, Kevin, served as a Dobbs Ferry police officer for 28 years. Brian's grandfather, Charlie Raffer, served for 38 years as a retired from the Eastchester Police Department as a detective. Brian graduated from Ardsley High School in 2008. He then continued his education at Long Island University, where he earned his bachelor's and master's of science degree with a focus on athletic training in 2013. While continuing his education, Brian worked as a seasonal employee for the Dobbs Ferry Department of Public Works. He went on to become the head athletic trainer at Iona Preparatory School from 2013 through 2016. In 2016, Brian was hired by this agency, and his law enforcement career began. Throughout his tenure, he's been assigned to the Patrol Division and is currently working the midnight shift. For you. Brian is loyal and dedicated member of this department. We believe with his knowledge of the law, the department, and this village, he's an ideal candidate, and we're glad to have you, so congratulations again. And why don't you say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the board. Chief, thank you. Thanks for recommending me and trusting me with this position. I started here with Chief. He was my sergeant, so he's seen me progress since I got hired, and I appreciate everything you've done to get me to this point. Thank you to all my fellow officers who I work with daily. They make this job, fun and worth coming to every day and serving this community. I want to thank my family who's here. I got my dad, my stepmom, my mom, my in-laws, my brother, my sister, my nephew, but most importantly, thank you to my wife who deals with the midnight schedule and has to sleep alone every night. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. We want to come up and do a picture. Congratulations. Someone can take a picture. Why don't you stand in front of the
Congratulations.
front of
Congratulations.
everybody here? Liz isn't here. So. Yeah, that's right. Do a picture.
The board has to stand.
You have to stand?
Yeah, they can't see you, so.
Probably scooch in a little.
Take the mayor's spot.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's have all the families come on up. Come on up.
This is happening. Yeah, here.
Scooch in.
It's like a panorama lens.
Nobody here. I know you're all going to stay to the end of the meeting. I know that.
So, who's protecting Dobbs Ferry right now?
Now's the time to leave. If you want to leave, now's the time.
Oh, really? Here.
Thanks, hang on.
You're welcome to stay, we have a budget here.
These are my favorite parts.
It's math, are you kidding me? I'd be out the door.
The first Saturday.
I want to say it was October 2nd. Untrustworthy memory. I can't tell you that. But when did we get to when? But if it was at the workshop, if it was at the last workshop, was it on? Oh, good. Super.
Yes.
Okay. We're up to public hearing number 1 regarding the tentative budget. Is there a motion to open the public hearing regarding the budget? Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee Sullivan, all in favor. Public hearing is now open regarding the budget. Jeff, should I turn it over to you, or does Richard want to do the?
Richard's gonna start.
All right, Richard, you want to start it?
Thank you, Mayor. We worked diligently together with the village treasurer and also with the cooperation of all the department heads to compile the tentative budget for 2023-24, which is being presented to you this evening as well as to the public. There'll be some particular items that the treasurer will bring to your attention. The village of Dobbs Ferry remains in very fiscally sound and healthy condition. Its bond rating has been reiterated by Moody's, the bond rating agency, and we continue to monitor all expenses to make sure that they are as reasonable as possible while maintaining the integrity of all the services to the public that they expect from a community such as Dobbs Ferry. I just want to touch on a couple of items that were kind of substantial in this fiscal year and in the one that's running into the new year, and that is a major project was undertaken by the village in October 2022 when it entered into a $4 million energy performance contract that's going to audit all the buildings in the village to make sure that they're at the highest energy performance levels and also tightening up on some of the energy upgrades that can make their performance that much better. This work will save the village much money over the 30-year lifespan of the improvements, and it is being paid for primarily from the savings that are being achieved. Under the tentative budget, the Department of Public Works has proposed and will see a minor reorganization to allow, with the approval of the board, for a more responsive department with the appointment of departmental foremen in the areas of sanitation and highway, joining the foreman that's already in place in the Parks Department. We've held the line in terms of hiring in the village because that, for better or for worse, ends up being your major expense between salaries and benefits, which are now almost 50% of salary. We did make some adjustments, some minor adjustments in existing positions, primarily to restore them to a point where they were several years ago. We propose to include the restoration of a part-time administrator in the building department, which had been there previously under the prior building inspector. That position will be shared 50-50 with a part-time position in the village clerk's office to give some leeway to the clerk to be able to actually step away from her desk, and also hopefully to start the training process to identify additional clerk potential in the future. The budget also provides for the creation of a full-time children's or teen librarian in the library. This is a position that existed probably 8 or 10 years ago, was ultimately reduced to a part-time position. So we're happy to try to back up the library and make its program that much more successful with the addition of that half position, I should say. The average assessed valuation of property within the village is approximately $646,000 for a single-family home. This year, as in all the prior years since the tax cap was legislated up in Albany, the Village of Dobbs Ferry proposes to keep its budget within the tax cap parameters as outlined by the state. In fact, because of your increases in assessments in the village, which is as a result of construction and much rehabilitation work that's done in the village, and hats off to the building department for helping bring in that revenue. It's functioning very highly now, in my opinion, with the addition of administrative person there to help. As a result, your actual village portion of a taxpayer's average village tax bill will see a decrease for the upcoming fiscal year of almost $100, about $96.90. So pretty proud of that result as well. I just wanted to comment on those few things, and then I'll turn it over to the treasurer for the presentation.
Thank you, Richard. I'm just going to jump into this. This shouldn't take too long, kind of quick. I'm going to start with a summary of the budget. We're proposing total appropriations of $24,519,303 across the operating and enterprise funds. This represents an increase of $1.8 million over the 2022-23 budget. The bulk of this increase relates to employee costs, including increases to health insurance costs and employee retirement costs. The proposed 23-24 tax levy is $16,412,439, which represents an increase of $777,000 roughly, or 4.97% over the 22-23 budget. The taxable assessed value of all properties within the village increased approximately $158 million, or 7.14%, which has allowed the village to propose a 2.03% tax rate cut. The proposed tax rate is $6.93 per $1,000 of assessed value, and that's compared to last year's $7.08.
Jeff, what does that mean? I just want to interrupt you, but what does that mean to people when you say that they've been cut from $7, they'll get a reduction from $7.08 to $6.93? What does that mean?
So if their property value remains unchanged from the prior year, then they're going to see a decrease into their tax bill.
Okay.
Their assessed value.
And another way to think about it is what Richard was talking about, that roughly $100, $96 and change would be for the average home. If the value of the assessment didn't go up, their tax bill would go down $100. So I have that right, Jeff?
Yep. This slide shows the tax levy changes for the past 15 years. Since its implementation, like Richard mentioned, the village has complied with New York State's tax cap legislation. And once again, this year we comply with the cap. We try very hard to balance taxes with the many costs but important services that the village provides, such as your fire, your police, road maintenance, garbage pickup that our residents have come to expect. New York State laws dictate how much municipalities can increase their tax levies from one year to the next. For 2023, 2024, the village has proposed a tax levy of $16,412,439, which again is compliant with the tax cap law. And again, with this budget, we were able to lower the tax rate to $6.93 per thousand of assessed value. And again, that roughly translates to a $100 decrease for an average assessment within the village. And this slide is showing the taxable value, the taxable assessed value over the past 14 years. We continue to discuss the increase with the assessor to maintain a good understanding of why the assessment changes year over year. The assessment process is complicated, and as you may recall, a couple years ago, the town completed a revaluation of all properties within the town. In 2021, they completed an update to that revaluation. The update showed a continued overall increase in values due to the real estate market and strong building and renovation work that residents continue to do to maintain and improve their properties. The issuance of building permits continues to be very strong within the village. And the taxpayers have benefited from the valuation trending up for the past 9 years. The uptick in property valuation has helped maintain a very stable tax rate, including, like again, this year, some tax rate decreases over the past several years. And the village continues to provide all the expected village services within the restraints of a cautious and prudent budget. As you'll see on the next slide, the Dobbs Ferry Village tax rate continues to be the second lowest of the river towns' villages. And a couple of the surrounding villages have had to propose to override the property tax cap in their 2023-24 budget process. So far, Dobbs Ferry's board and administration has been able to avoid proposing a budget that exceeds the tax cap. We will continue to monitor ever-increasing expenditures and costs as we move into the coming years. The village continues to deal with some aging infrastructure that may necessitate bonded projects and concomitant expenses in the near future. We continue to work together to bring the residents a high level of services at one of the lowest tax rates in the river towns, and we continue to do so with this budget. And we'll see over the next 2 slides, employee benefit costs continue to be a significant expense to the village. On this side, we see budgeted costs for employee retirement. Retirement system costs can vary from year to year due to fluctuations in areas such as the economy, stock market, and state mandates or requirements. The rates could continue to trend upward in the future. However, over time, the village will inevitably see the retirement of some longtime village employees. This helps taxpayers as they will most likely be replaced by an employee in one of the retirement tiers that requires larger contributions from the employee and a much lower contribution from the village for that employee. For the upcoming year, we anticipate a continuation of the upward trend of healthcare costs. However, we have continued to try to contain these costs to the village going forward. In recently settled contract negotiations, we were able to get higher employee contributions to healthcare costs as new employees progress through their career at the village. And these contributions are starting to improve village expense as we work to contain costs for the village taxpayers. This slide shows expenditures by type, and as you can see, employee costs in the form of payroll and benefits will be the highest village expenditure and represent 67% of budgeted expenditures. This slide shows the allocation of costs essentially by department, together with associated debt and benefits costs. Public safety is one of the largest components of every municipal budget, and with the expense primarily reflected in personnel costs and employee benefits. Non-property taxes such as sales tax collections continue to be the village's major revenue source other than the tax levy. Recent increases in the sales tax rate have proven to be a real benefit for the village, and again this year we anticipate approximately $3.2 million in non-property tax collections. The trend of revenues and expenditures continues upward. Personnel costs, once again, are a large portion of the increase because of contractual cost of living adjustments and increasing cost of employee benefits. Again, we continue to work to contain all expenditures within the village's budget. This slide illustrates the distribution of property taxes within the village. The largest portion of your tax bill continues to be the school district at close to 69% of your property taxes. Village-provided services such as the police department, snow removal, garbage removal remain at approximately 20% of your total tax bill. And as you see, the balance is between the town and county taxes. The next two slides show the general fund's unreserved fund balance has been trending for the past 16 years. Unreserved fund balance is, in essence, the village's savings account for unforeseen circumstances that can occur. The village will continue to work hard to keep the unreserved fund balance at a reasonable level in an effort to ensure that we provide the highest level of service to the residents of Dobbs Ferry at the best possible cost. In summary, we have proposed a budget that is once again in compliance with New York State's tax levy cap. The tax rate decreases to $6.93 per $1,000 of assessed value, with another increase in taxable assessed value and an increase of expenditures of approximately 8%. We've been able to continue to maintain a strong fund balance, and we see that the village's Moody's rating of big A, little a2, what amounts to the highest rating a municipality of this size can attain, and a continued excellent score in New York State's fiscal stress tests. And that said, there are future concerns we must continue to keep an eye on, noted on this slide. And our goal is to provide the highest level of service to the residents of Dobbs Ferry at the best possible cost. We feel that this budget does that. And then if there's any questions.
You had fun with some of the PowerPoint animations, didn't you?
Yes, I did, actually.
So I want to thank Jeff and Richard. I know this is a very difficult situation with the budget. The staff comes to you with a lot of requests, and it's your job to parse out and make a balanced budget as best you can. So we really appreciate the effort and time and energy that it takes for you guys to do this, and I think it certainly is from my perspective, a very responsible budget, and it balances all of the needs, most of the needs of the village staff, as well as makes it almost affordable for residents, more affordable for residents than it has in the past. So it's a difficult balancing act, and I certainly appreciate everything that you guys have done. And I also appreciate the village departments for coming in with reasonable requests, and as they always have. So having said that, are there any questions or comments from the board?
I would just echo your comments that, we should be very proud of the work that Jeff and administrator and the village staff have done. And the other observation I would make is, some of the growth that we have allowed in the village has really helped us keep the tax rate down for residents within the village. So in my view, we've been able to strike that balance where we've had some growth, and it hasn't always been popular, but it's one of the things that has helped us have such a strong financial position by growing our overall tax base.
I do think it's important, though, in the spirit of transparency, to note that while, it saying that the tax rate has gone down makes it sound like people's individual taxes are going down. That is only if your assessment has not gone up, which most people's, as Jeff pointed out, the trend is for higher property tax valuations. So the fact that there is a lower tax rate means that we've tried our hardest, but it doesn't mean that people's taxes are not going up. Along with that, this is the first year that the effects of the landing reclassification are kicking in. So I'm sure that will have an effect as well. So I just want to just be fully transparent that lower tax rate does not necessarily mean your taxes are going down.
Well, and actually, to just follow up on that point, the 157 million, I don't know, Jeff, whether you have any kind of a breakdown of how much of that is an increase in the valuation of existing stock and how much of it is investment that's been made over the past several years. It's a hard number to split, but it's some combination, to Matt's point, of those two numbers. Right. So it doesn't mean that people's individual tax numbers are going to go down, but it's certainly, the growth has helped us control how much people's costs have gone up.
I'm not suggesting that this is an irresponsible budget or that we're trying to pull the wool. It's very important. The math here is not difficult, but is opaque to a lot of people. So I want to just make sure that we're being as forthcoming as possible about what to expect when those envelopes come to you or to your escrow company in a month.
And I just want to reiterate to the slide that showed that it's only about 20% of the tax bill is what's within anyone sitting up here's control. So, almost 70% of what we pay in taxes in Dobbs Ferry is to the fabulous schools that we have here. But there's nothing we can do about that unless we combine school districts. So this is a small portion. So we're talking about percentages of a percentage within a bigger percentage. So
I do have one question. We had our budget meeting and we went through all the requests from the various departments, and then there were some trade-offs that had to be made to get inside the tax cap. Can you just reiterate, what of the requests, what significant pieces of that we may have had to say no to in order to get to this number?
Yeah, there was a number of equipment requests that were removed. There was some staffing changes that was removed. That's really the bulk of the.
Can I just ask a couple questions about those specifically? When we talk about equipment purchases, in theory, what you would prefer to do is to have a sort of rolling expenditure of equipment. So I'll use, for an example, police vehicles. Mm-hmm. Rather than get stuck every several years with having to purchase 5 or 6, the idea that you have is to purchase 1 or 2 every year, retire them before they have any value left for resale, and that sort of thing. So are we, in order to stay under the 5% tax cap, did you have to abandon that way of thinking? And if so, how far off are you?
So, what we do is we look closely as this current fiscal year winds down. If there's money still available in the budget, we try to replace that type of equipment with this budget, with the current fiscal budget.
So, out of curiosity, what was the approximate dollar amount that we cut from equipment purchases to? Do you know what that?
It was several $100,000. Yeah.
So, and I bring this up because, and then I'm going to get to personnel next, is that we've had 2 years of, I don't know, Larry knows probably this number better, but close to 10% inflation. And, you know, a lot of that, and some of those numbers are even higher, right? If you look at cost of healthcare, in many cases has increased more than 10%. And so we're faced with having expenses that are sort of increasing at a rate beyond what we're allowed to increase the tax revenue by, right? And that's a problem. And I don't want to put this off on future boards, whether that's me on that future board or someone else. And so we haven't really talked about this a lot, but what happens if we are beyond that tax cap? And I know that you had a slide that showed that some, you know, Ardsley, Irvington, I don't know, Tarrytown and Hastings were the same color, so I wasn't sure who was.
Oh, yeah, no, it was the start. It was
But
Ardsley.
it seems
and-
like
or Elm
3 or 4 of our immediate neighbors are above that tax cap. So it just seems like it's common practice. Are there any repercussions from the state to the village if we were to exceed the tax cap?
No, there were some property tax refunds that were given a number of years ago. That program has stopped. Governor Cuomo at the time made this a permanent part, the tax cap a permanent part of law a couple of years ago, you know, just to try to keep the costs, taxpayer costs down. So not that I'm aware of, there's no longer any disincentive other than your taxpayers.
And so now let's just go to the personnel question. I know that one of the major costs personnel-wise were 2 requests from the police department. One, which was to one police officer, which would bring the force back to a number of 28 after having lost one of our police officers due to injury and attack a couple of years ago. And so we had, in addition to that, there was a request for a 29th officer, which would be a dedicated youth officer. So where are we with that? Are we, where the personnel are?
So the youth officer is included in this budget. The concern that I believe the police chief has is that that individual cannot be exclusively assigned to serving the youth within the village.
So this budget has 29.
It does not. It still has 27, but the youth officer has been funded.
That's training. That was a small amount for finishing up training, I believe.
No, Rick, I might need your help with what you did with your youth officer. I mean, Rick obviously knows a lot more about what he wants to do with that.
Yeah, but I have a harder time questioning him than I have questions.
So if I'm up to speed, what we have in the budget is for a youth officer after June 1st. And it would be a specialized assignment, but still part of patrol. So within our authorized strength of 27 officers, my intention would be to recommend one police officer to the rank of youth officer, so he can begin being compensated for work he's currently doing outside of his normal patrol duties, but again, he's still part of patrol. So when I presented my original request was by expanding the agency by 1 to 28, be able to backfill the squad, and that youth officer would then become independent of patrol. So I set up a schedule Monday through Friday with like school kind of hours that have that ability to interact without worrying that you have to backfill patrol. So that was the original request.
Yeah, and so the thing I want to talk about today is that you know, my first opinion about that was, you know, I was concerned about increasing the budget, and the numbers were high, but I think that since that time, we've, you know, we've seen a lot of tragic incidents. We have had our own scares in Dobbs Ferry, and you know, it's impossible to place a value on those sorts of things, but I'm certain that the cost of adding a dedicated youth officer is very little relative to the risk play. So I'm in favor of adding this dedicated youth officer and increasing the budget for that reason. And I don't think we've had a chance since the first budget conversation to talk about that as a board, but I wanted to raise that issue.
So you're asking for, you would like to see them hire another police officer? and
So
then
that
one
we
will
have a
be
dedicated youth
Right,
officer.
Right.
I think we talked about this during the budget meeting and how there's benefits to youth officer. I mean, youth officer full-time isn't going to protect all the schools in our community from the threats that you're talking about that are happening in other places. Like, that has to be, you know, full-time security that's on that school property and other construction, you know, glass or locks and other security measures that they can take. I mean, this is, youth officer more works with the children about safety and drugs and other issues, stuff like that. But I think the problem really is, even if we all wanted to do it, it's another $250,000 in the budget.
Rick, you saw that job as being more of a interacting with the students type of position as opposed to, because there are, what, at least two campuses for the school,
So
public
there's more, 'cause
schools,
it's not
for the
just,
public
youth
schools.
officer is not just for the public schools, right?
Correct. There would be, you know, flexibility for all the schools. Surprisingly, we do have quite a number of educational institutions in the 2.5 school. I'm sorry. But historically, our youth officer has worked in the majority with the public schools, with Springhurst Elementary, middle school, and the high school. And as requested for assistance, whether Merced College, Master's School, Children's Village, St. Christopher's, the others.
Without asking for details, because that would be inappropriate, I understand that you and your department do focus on school safety and do manage and train to be able to be as responsive as possible.
That's correct.
And I don't think that, I mean, I think part of this discussion, you raise it, those are good points you raise, but I think that there is often a lot of signs, there are often a lot of, there's a lot of information that gets kind of ignored in these cases, and it seems that you know, having someone who's dedicated to that may have more insight into the things that are going on at the schools. And not, this is not the only reason. I mean, the other thing that comes to mind is if we have a dedicated youth officer and they're spending time with kids that are struggling, whether that's with you know, issues related to drugs or you know, it's just the possibility to keep one kid out of trouble and, you know, potentially out of, you know, something more serious, just again seems worth that number.
I guess I would just also ask, like, if we've identified that we have a gap in those kinds of services in our village, which I don't know that there is. I mean, I know that, of course, if we could increase our force exponentially and provide, you know, safety at every single corner all day long, of course, we would want to do that. But if we've identified that there's a gap in providing services like mental health services or safety services for kids who are going down troubled paths or whatever it is the right solution to that a youth officer or a 50% more youth officer than what we currently have, or are there other solutions? I don't know the answer to that, but I think if that's a concern that we have, we should solve that to the highest, best degree possible. And I'm not, I didn't hear the chief when we were having these conversations say that that was specifically what this officer was for, even though, of course, like, if we were able to spend endlessly on youth, on kids' safety, of course, that would, I think, be everyone's priority.
I would say that, safety in schools is a bigger issue than just a Dobbs Ferry issue, and it's an opportunity to maybe explore shared services for something like this to combine things. But I also think for some students, the presence of a police officer in the school is not comforting. It's not helpful. And I think we also need to be sensitive to the diversity in our community too. And just with all due respect, I'm just saying that this is a big issue. One more police officer isn't necessarily going to be the answer, but I think it's something we could explore. If this is a real concern in the village, then it could take a bigger solution than one we could provide just with village staff.
I do think, though, that I remember having several years ago a conversation with Officer Kamke, who was at the time, I believe, a fully dedicated, or at least largely a dedicated youth officer, and he was talking to me about how he knows what's going on in the schools because kids talk to him, because he's in there all the time. They have a familiarity with him. So, they'll narc on each other, essentially. And like he was telling me that he had the ability to go and intercede before there was a problem because he sort of had the zeitgeist of the school, and he knew the kids knew him, and he had got a lot of information from that he could use. So I'm not for busting budget caps. I'm generally on the record as being against raising taxes too much, but I am very sympathetic to this request, largely because of that interaction with Officer Kamke, who explained to me really, before I was on the board, just how important that role was and how effective he was in that role, just because of the dynamic. And maybe that was specific to what an approachable guy Officer Kamke is, or maybe it's endemic in the role. But I find myself sympathetic to the idea of adding that officer.
Is the difference between what Officer Kamke was and this role, is there a number of difference in hours spent in the school between what we've approved so far and what was the case that Matt's referencing?
When I took over the department, I reorganized the staffing to be more efficient. So prior, that was one of the issues that Justin was very effective because he was operating as we had extra police officers kind of in the squad, so he could operate independently. I have since made the department more efficient. But, that is exactly that. Officer Justin Kamke, prior to him, Marty Koster. Going further back, Joe Ellman. These former youth officers were able to make those connections. And while it is a point that we understand that don't want to be viewed as an enemy, we are Dobbs Ferry community. And I think is the importance why I was, intangible, if you will, of that full-time position, being able to make a connection in our schools. Recently, started making a connection with the superintendent of the school district on Chilton Village grounds, and she had also expressed to me that she felt now more than ever she wanted to see police within the school, so that kids start making the association that you can approach us, and that's really where it came to. Was a dedicated officer. He said that I am conscious and see always.
So we're down an officer because one is out on disability. If that,
Our squad is, yes, we
Right.
are down a supervisor. I have a squad that is operating without a sergeant while we sit retirement to make a decision.
would that help the scheduling if that position, if he comes back, or if there's a retirement and there's a replacement?
I could backfill temporarily the police officer into that post, because that's one of the issues, depending on how the rotation works. They are running light, meaning that their minimum staffing is consistently 3 officers. When it falls below that, we fill that with overtime. We try to get a supervisor first, collective bargaining agreement. After that, it goes to the added grade, where the senior officer, or whoever's the next senior officer acting in the role of a sergeant is compensated just proportionally.
I think the question was different, or maybe I just didn't understand either, but I think it was if that sergeant position was filled, would the youth officer have more time to be a youth officer?
Thank you for clarifying.
Would be different, correct. Now, the sergeant, to not be confused, the issue, if we're just looking at increasing the department by one police officer, the youth officer would act independently of patrol, and by getting in that other officer, he's just going to backfill the vacancy that the incumbent held as police officer. So it's not really affecting the supervisory aspect of the squad that is running like the sergeant.
And if we had the sergeant, it wouldn't mean that there was the youth officer currently designated who's on patrol and not always available during the school hours. It's not the case that he would always be available for the schools.
The sergeant, what we were just looking at backfilling the sergeant.
So it's completely separate question.
They are separate.
Any other comments? Anybody from the public? Come on up.
Patty Steinschneider from 329 Broadway. I wasn't actually planning to talk about the police, but I coached youth football in Dobbs Ferry for 18 years. I can tell you that the youth officer in Dobbs Ferry plays an amazingly important role in the relationship of the kids. They do break down those boundaries. They're not scary policemen. Before you named, we had Betsy Gilardi, who was the youth officer. That was when my son was in 8th grade, which if any of you have had kids, 8th grade boys really need to have a youth officer. They need to have somebody who says, that's not a good idea. We don't want to do that. So I think anything we can do, maybe we can't get it right now, but we should be working towards that because I think it's a very important position. The main thing I'm here tonight is as the STF member. One of the things that was talked about was having a foreman, I guess, added to the DPW. I don't know if that's included or not. We think that's very important. As you talked about earlier, we're coming out with OOP stickers. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is to track who's getting the OOPS stickers, because it isn't just the reminder factor of it. It's the awareness that there are people who are repeat offenders on this and who just don't follow it and don't. I have a neighbor who they put their stuff out maybe 5 days before pickup, and it ends up blowing around the neighborhood and things end up in the street. So I don't think they feel the necessity, it's not my neighbor to the north. My neighbor to the north has a beautiful property. We're very well maintained. So I think, being able to track that, just so we can find out what's really going on, would really be helpful. And one of the things we've thought about is it needs to perhaps even grow from being a noob sticker, that when you see somebody who's doing this as a repeat offender, they get written a summons. And they have to pay a fine if they're going to do it. So I think there's a benefit to that. I think that's something that we should have. And my last point is that in 2002, the Downtown Improvement Committee asked a group of us to put together an evaluation of the downtown. At that time, we identified 50 properties in the downtown that were in need of renovation, restoration, or perhaps replacement. As Trustee Taylor and Trustee Rosenberg both noted about that we are doing better than we would be as a result of the growth that we've had. I think that's a very important thing to continue with. Less than half of those 50 properties have been dealt with. If we walk out of Village Hall across the street from us is a piece of property that is begging to have something better happen with it. So that's something we really need to embrace. And I'll just close with the idea that I'm sure you guys, I think, Mayor Rasulo did sign the WMOA letter to our governor with our governor's concept of a good way of accomplishing needed housing in New York State. I think she's using Teddy Roosevelt's big stick. I think if we understand how we could immunize ourselves from having somebody decide that we need 4 towers, 15 stories tall down on the waterfront to house 1,200 people or something, we can do 1% per year. We've shown that we were able to do that in the past, and I think we should have that as a goal to better our housing stock in Dobbs Ferry. Partially to house people fairly, more affordably, but also to give more tax base that can reduce the taxes that everyone's paying. And as anybody on this board knows, that's not easy for everybody to pay those taxes. And I'm still up to date, right? Yeah. So I thank you all, and I do really thank you. I mean, the amount of work you guys put into this is remarkable, and it's a very, very difficult task, and, the village should appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Patty. Steve, wait, Steve, is there air conditioning that we could put on in here or no? This air conditioning doesn't
It
work?
looks like there's brand new.
I know, that's why.
Those are splits, I
From
think.
the-
Are they work? Are they
From
working?
the-
We can reopen the doors now. I think it's quiet too.
In the meantime, Jeff, you could correct me, but the sanitation superintendent is in the budget.
Is in the budget.
So Patty, you didn't hear that, but the sanitation superintendent is in this budget.
Anybody else in the public?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
Or someone else?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, backtracking significantly, I wanted to ask about the non-property taxes revenue source. I missed what that includes, so very disproportionate.
Sales
Sales tax
Sales
and the
tax.
hotel tax.
tax.
Okay, gotcha. So that gets funneled to us through the county and the
Sales
town.
tax comes through the county. The hotel tax comes from the hotel directly.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Is there anybody online who's asking questions? Okay, well, we have an interesting issue that Trustee Patino has brought up. We don't have to decide it today.
Actually,
We
if
do?
you are going to exceed the tax cap, you need to pass a local law. So you kind of need to decide soon. So I can draft a local law, you can conduct a public hearing, and you can pass that local law in advance of May 1st when you have to adopt your budget.
All right,
Okay.
so
That's not-
there's other options, though. You could go back and make cuts elsewhere,
Right.
or
Because this is the tentative budget.
this
so
is the tentative budget.
It's not your budget yet,
Right.
but
Or you could appropriate more fund balance.
What is the actual delta on what we've currently, what's currently in the tentative budget to the
Can I just-
full-time youth officer off patrol?
Can I just clarify that if we, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we decide to approve hiring a full-time youth officer, we also have to approve hiring a new patrol person to replace the patrol that that person was doing. And if that's wrong, correct me.
It's one of that.
So as it stands in the current budget, we had positioned the increase to account for the difference in the top paid patrolman for the youth officer. So that is in the current budget. And then, yes, as the deputy mayor points out, we would be expanding the agency by 1 back to 28. So then I would have to then work with civil service to create the position for the expansion of a police officer.
So the salary for the youth officer would not change whether that youth officer is on patrol or
Correct.
not on patrol?
Correct, yeah.
And then additional, so the delta really is only the staff
Starting
on patrol,
police.
Salary of the extra police officer.
Starting PO.
which is, what is the total on that?
It'd be around $100,000 increase for starting
So
PO.
we're talking about $100,000.
In salary or in,
Salary and benefits.
It's
I think
important,
this
but just
starting
point
is-
out, that's the
Yeah.
starting, and then I believe after 4 years, there's a significant
Every
increase.
year it increases.
There's sort of smaller increases, but after 4 or 5 years, there's a big jump.
Will be over 6 figures, yeah, it'll be over 100,000.
Yeah, the way the salary configure, it's small increments from first, second, and third step with the final year.
Currently paying the increase. Or we're not paying.
So the options are, you said if we decide to go this way, we'll take more money out of fund balance,
Correct.
or we could defer buying whatever those vehicles were.
Or other parts, other areas within that budget, whether it's equipment or whether it's something else.
Right. So just generally, how we feel about doing that?
I
Shari, what do
remember
you
there
think?
being like a lot of things that looked like they could come out of this.
Right.
Just talking about specifically the police department budget, right?
No, you can go anywhere in that budget if you decided to.
And you can pass the local law and then not use,
Right.
you know, in other words, some of the other communities in the area will pass the local at the beginning of the budget season, just to have it ready in, if you can't balance the budget under the tax cap. So,
That's what we used to do.
yeah,
We stopped doing that. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because the state backtracked on that and weren't going to give the refunds if you had
Right.
overridden the cap.
Are we currently right at,
We were right at the
The cap?
limit.
yeah.
yes.
Could you speak a little hot?
Me?
We're having trouble
We
hearing
really
you.
Sorry.
can't hear you. You'll hear
Sorry.
them.
We've got the AC going down here now, so.
So yeah, we're right at the limit right now.
Okay.
and can you explain how the fund balance mechanism would work? You said there are two ways to do it. One is
So the fund balance
letting-
mechanism is really a short-term fix. Again, it's dipping into the savings account, the rainy day funds. So you would really essentially be kicking the can down the road on an override of the tax cap.
Because that salary would be with us next year and next year.
Continue
you
on,
can't keep
continue
on dipping
on,
back into
correct.
the savings. or-
You will run out eventually,
Yeah.
and, you know,
We
you,
can't do it, we can do that more than 1 year.
right, 1 year, I would recommend max on that.
So what are our thoughts on this, Jessica? What are you thinking? You don't have to commit yourself now, but just generally, what are you thinking?
I mean, I guess I'd like to hear, I'd like to continue the conversation because I feel like the texture and details of why the youth officer, why this shift in the youth officer's position is really essential, and like looking at some, if we can get some more data and more information to inform like whether this $100,000 increased annual investment in village safety is best deployed in this manner versus another manner. I think that's a very, of course, children's safety is my top priority. I hope that goes without saying, but I also think that that's a pricey addition that we should consider carefully. I'm not saying we shouldn't make it, but is it another couple of social workers in the school, or, you know, we don't have jurisdiction over who the school hires, but I'm just saying, like, maybe should we get with the Board of Ed and talk about this comprehensively and understand from their perspective, is this an investment that they want to see as well? You know, it feels like a little bit making this decision in a vacuum is not, I just need more information, I think.
Okay. Matt, what do you think?
I mean, I said earlier, I mean, the experience that I had, you know, sort of understanding what the role is from that several years ago discussion with Officer Kamke, I do think it is a position that has a lot of value. I can't speak for the Board of Education. You know, they're not, you know, they're as budget constrained as, you know, as anybody else. So, you know, for us to suggest, hey, you should hire a couple more social workers, I don't know that jurisdiction or not, that's something that they would be able to do inside of their own constraints. I think it is kind of on us to figure out whether the chief's recommendation is one that we should take. For my part, I'm comfortable saying yes to that role.
Okay, Nicole?
I want to think about it.
Shari, what do you think?
I think I agree with Trustee Galen that there needs to be a little more discussion. I mean, my kids knew Officer Marty when they were in school and Officer Campy, and as two white kids, maybe they felt they had a relationship. I don't necessarily know that if you asked all the kids if they appreciated having an officer in the school, that they would say yes to it. So I don't know that that's the solution. I think it's nice to think that it is. It's nice to think if we have a dedicated officer in the schools, all our children will be safer, and it's a good way, but I don't necessarily know that that's what's needed. And to Trustee Galen's point, there could be a need for more public safety in another area or another aspect of the village that we haven't explored, or it could be that we'll reach this conclusion that, yes, this is what we need. But I don't know that we have all the information just based anecdotally on having a conversation with the officer whose job it was to do that job. So I just think that, there's more to it than that. It's not the hugest expense that we'll approve or deny, but I don't think it has to do with that as much as it has to do with, is this the right thing, and is this exactly what we need, and will it actually solve a problem? Because the problems are societal, they're very, very big, and if someone solved it, then we'd all be in a much better place, but there's a lot going on, and the world is a scary place for kids right now. And so, if this is the answer, then that would be great. I'm not 100% convinced at this point that I know enough to know that that's the answer.
Okay. Mike, do you want anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think you raised some good points, and I don't think there's any illusion that it's going to solve all these problems for everyone. I think that my position is just that if it solves one problem for one kid, then it's worth that expenditure for me. And so that's my take on it. And there's no guarantee that it will do that or it won't, but I think, as a cost risk analysis, because the cost is relatively low compared to the cost of something, like incarceration, for example, like what we pay as a society for put someone away for a year is like what we pay an officer to work to try to keep that kid out. Yeah. And so, and that's not even looking at all these other issues. So for me, in the end, it's worth the expense. So that's why I think.
Larry?
I think it is likely a good idea. I am not in favor of blowing the tax cap for doing it. I think, I'm sorry, Chief, but I would also ask you if you were going to prioritize in your budget, looking across the various lines and had to make a difficult decision, if this is as important as it is, how much could you cut elsewhere in your budget to be able to, put this youth officer on a full-time basis? I'm not suggesting I think it's a bad idea. It would be interesting, and you may have feedback from the school system, from the superintendent or others, as to, their opinion as to the importance of this.
I can certainly reach out to the superintendent of Dallas Schools, and we can have that conversation, just to circle back and have an answer for you, absolutely.
Okay, and can you also let us know what the neighboring communities do?
Sure.
Okay. I think the tax cap really is a political number. It really means nothing. It was just put forth by a elected official to make it seem as if he was forcing the smaller communities and villages to be fiscally responsible when we don't even know if in his day the state was fiscally responsible, and they didn't even give us money to balance that. They would just say to us, we have to come under the cap, and they weren't giving us enough money to make up for these expenses where I think you said 50% of our budget goes to employee benefits. So I don't have a real problem with going over the cap. I just feel also that seems like it should involve more thought than just adding. But, ultimately, the police chief is in the best situation to evaluate that. So I also want time to think about it. I think we should all think about it. The chief, you could look at other ways, and Jeff, you could look at other ways of maybe, if it means deferring 2 cars, maybe we can do that. Laura Lee, I think you should prepare the law just in case, okay?
We would need to, what,
I can do that, but you'll probably need to conduct a special
Right.
meeting in order to schedule the public hearing on that, because you'll need to conduct the public hearing and pass it before you vote on a final budget that exceeds the tax cap, and you'll need to vote by May 1st. So I'm just letting you know, it's completely possible, and it's a very easy draft. In fact, I've drafted a number of them in the past, and I can use them as specimens, but you'll need to convene a special meeting in order to pass a resolution to set a public hearing date so we can publish the legal notice.
We couldn't do that and set a public hearing tonight for the 25th and then decide it before we decide the final budget?
You don't have a local law in front of you. It's not, it needs to be in your hands
Before you set the public hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm not even sure we are going to go over the cap. We may find other ways of coming up with that money if we decide to go that
But is
way,
there-
but yes, I understand.
Is there any reason, Jeff, now not to do that at the beginning of the budget process
next year?
next year? Just as in case?
That, to me, well, that's a very good question. Yeah.
I mean, if somebody could think about that and look at it, if there's any cons to doing that.
Because you could table it and not conduct the public hearing, but at least you'd have it in your hands and you'd have scheduled the public hearing
Yeah.
by now. Just
Yeah.
that you don't have to pass the law. And you're going to need at least 60%. The statute requires a vote of at least 60% of your roll here in order to pass a local law that exceeds the tax cap.
Okay,
That's just a procedural
okay,
requirement.
Sounds good going forward.
okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the budget? So is there a motion to close the budget workshop? Public hearing, thank you. Trustee Patino, second. Trustee Taylor, all in favor. The public hearing is now closed. Let's move on to the second public hearing. Is there a motion to open the public hearing regarding the property tax exemptions for qualified firefighters and ambulance workers? Trustee Galen, second. Trustee Rosenberg, all in favor. Public hearing is now open. Laura Lee, can you speak to this?
Yes, I can. The governor recently enacted a revised provision of the real property tax law, which provides an opportunity for you and enact a local law to provide a partial exemption at 10% for your eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers. You've opted to permit that registration for qualifying at a 2 years of service. And also, you've added the options for eligibility for a lifetime exemption for those qualifying individuals. And also, you've elected the option provided in the governor's law to provide for the surviving spouses of the eligible members who were already enrolled in the program under certain conditions. And, again, that we'll need to get this to Greenberg by May 1st, just so, because your assessor is in the village of Greenberg, or the town of Greenberg, and she'll need to start the process of accepting the applications.
So just so I'm clear, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it'll be a 10% tax exemption of assessed value of property, and I think we expanded it to in 3 situations, right? Or is it, it's 3 situations, right? It's a grant of a lifetime exemption to any enrolled member who accrues more than 20 years of active volunteer service. Number 2 would be an exemption to an unremarried spouse of an enrolled member who was killed in the line of duty, as long as that person had been enrolled for at least 5 years, and an exemption to an unremarried spouse of a deceased enrolled member. Doesn't matter how that person died, as long as that person was a enrolled member for at least 20 years.
Correct.
Correct?
That is correct. And for your other years of service, it would be 2 consecutive years of service. And again, this is the assessed valuation on a primary residence within the village of Dobbs Ferry.
Right, so it used to be that they had to be 5 years, now it's, we're going to make it, we pass it to 2
Correct.
years.
Yes.
Okay, I think we discussed this already. Is there any other comments on this? Okay, then I think we're ready to move forward on it. I can just close the public hearing and we can vote on it, right?
If you have no comments from,
Public, you guys want to come up? You going to speak against it?
Good evening, Joseph Giuliano, Assistant Fire Chief. just on behalf of the fire department, I'd like to thank you guys for considering this, local law. This is a great tool that we could use to help, recruit and retain members long-term. So, obviously recruiting and retention is a big problem, not just for us, but throughout New York State volunteer fire departments. And we meet together as chiefs with the other municipalities, once a month, and we talk about things, and a couple of them are doing the same local law as well. Just another thing I just wanted to put out there, that's probably coming down the road too. I know some other communities up north in northern Westchester, they're also doing this, and I know it's nothing to do with you guys, but just to make you aware, because we might need your help in the future with this. They're going to the school boards as well, because obviously this is just the village tax, not the, the school tax. And seeing the treasurer's presentation, obviously most of the taxes that residents pay go towards the school. So that is something, that's going to be starting to get brought up around other communities, to have the schools also adopt a similar policy to where they give 10% off to the volunteers as well. And I do think that that will draw a huge amount of volunteers back into the community to where we can sustain this long term. So I just want to bring that up. Thank you guys, and we appreciate all your support.
Well, thank you. We appreciate everything that you guys do for us. The men and women of the volunteers are the lifeblood of the village. We really appreciate it. And it would be a good idea to go to the school districts on that.
Could we, like, as a board, write to the school board and, support of this? What is the, what is the?
Laura Lee, what's the ethics of that?
Can we do that?
I'm not sure how they're accomplishing it, because as far as I know, that the statute has to authorize this exemption, and right now it relates to municipalities, so.
Okay. So they would have to lobby the government, state.
It's possible. I mean, I could double check in the discussions. NICOM had a whole program on this that I attended, and they've been very helpful in helping us draft the appropriate legislation. But as far as I know, the New York State Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A, allows for this exemption for the municipalities.
Okay.
Because it has to do with residency in the municipality and the school district boundaries are not aligned with the residency.
To follow up on Trustee Patino's question, though, would it be possible then if we couldn't write a letter to the school board, but we could write a letter to the editor in support of something like this, right? As a board, we could just come out publicly. I mean, it's my activist in me coming out, but I think that this is
a letter to the governor, a letter to the governor, and also your local legislators.
I think to the governor and the legislators.
Yeah. I think we should. I mean, I think that that's wonderful that you guys are doing that, because as we saw in the presentation, 70% of the taxes are going to the school, and I do believe, as you said, it would be a big incentive to help you guys attract more volunteers and have them stay longer.
Yeah, so just for the record, I don't want to have any confusion. Nobody's passed it yet. That's what they're talking about coming down the road is, having the schools adopt a similar policy. So nobody has passed it yet, but that is being brought up, for future, considerations and support from local school districts to do it as well.
I actually think I saw a letter to the editor about that, requesting that. In the last
Hastings,
few-
yes.
Yeah, Hastings.
Was it last week, I believe?
Yeah, I think I saw that.
The lobbying has to be done at the legislative level, because the school's not going to voluntarily do it. If it were part of this provision in New York State Real Property Tax Law, then the schools could be lobbied directly, so.
Okay, so we could write to Senator Stewart Cousins.
Correct.
Okay, is there anybody in the, go ahead, talk.
And your new Assemblywoman, Ms. Shimpsky.
Good evening, Neil Sweeting, 6'5", Briary Road, lifelong resident. I've been in the fire department for 38 years. This program has been in place for the last 20 years. I've been getting this exemption through the town of Greenberg.
Correct.
Right.
But I came to this board 20 years ago and said, you need to help and put this out there. Make this known, all right? All support behind you 100% to pass this, but we can't just let it die there. We need a comprehensive effort to use this as a recruitment tool. Spell it out to residents. Let them know what they get, all right, what they can get, what kind of benefits, all right? because we are really struggling manpower, fire departments, not just Dobbs Ferry, it's all municipalities. We are not far, as other municipalities are, we are not that far away from having to pay people. All right? There are municipalities in Westchester County now that are smaller than Dobbs Ferry and whose fire department answers fewer calls than we do that are paying staff. If you think taxes are bad now, wait till people see the taxes when we have to start paying people. All right? And this does impact the schools, because if it gets to that point where 5, 6, 10 years down the line where we have to start paying people, people are at some point they're going to reach breaking point where I can't do this anymore. And the only recourse you have as a taxpayer is through the schools, because it's the only budget you get to vote on. And people might just start saying, I can't vote anymore on these school budgets, and turn it down. So it could be an impact on the schools. So anything we can do to get discussions in place or talk with the school boards, it's got to help us. But we need you, the village, to put something out, man. Can't just be the fire department saying, you know, we're doing this. We need you guys, some flashy program, something to saying, help our emergency services, fire and EMS. These are some benefits that you can get as a resident. This is what we expect you to do to get those benefits. But we need to really put that out, because we are not that far away, folks, from having to pay people. And it's going to be a cost that none of us can absorb. So, you know, I'm 56 years old, got almost 38 years in the department. I went to a call a few months ago, 4 people on the truck, and I was the junior man. All right? Our senior, most active member of this department, who made over 90% of the calls last year, is 72 years old. We need people. Use this as a tool. Help us recruit. Put this out there, or our costs are going to go up significantly. I mean, our costs would rival if we have to start staffing people. And we're talking about one additional salary here. If we just put 3 people on to drive 3 trucks going out the door, to staff 3 trucks, you need to hire 12 people. That's a third of the police department's budget right there.
Neil, if you can make some suggestions for, you know, how we might put it out, because we're not really in the publicity business. We have the mayor's newsletter. We have some small bore resources to do publicity on things. But if you have some concrete suggestions, we would be happy to hear them.
You know what, we'll leave it with the fire department. You guys.
Yeah, what I was going to suggest was, I mean, obviously you guys all seem to be on board. If we could appeal, like Lorelei said, at the state level with Andrea Stewart Cousins, something like that, if one of you guys could be a liaison with us,
Sure.
work, you know, hand in hand, instead of coming back to every meeting and
Right.
every little step. If we could have a liaison with us, anybody who wants to volunteer.
I'm the liaison for the fire department, so
Yeah, so I mean,
unlucky for you, you have
Yeah,
me.
But yeah, no, anything, you know, like I said, we could talk outside of this, email, back, you know, whatever, instead of, you know, if everybody's.
I just want to say that lobbying the state is different than recruitment efforts to get people
Yeah,
to
100%.
join. So I don't see why we couldn't put something on our Facebook page and send something in your newsletter that lets people know, and you have a day where you're inviting people into the firehouse or whatever to meet and talk about this, and we could certainly help publicize our recruitment effort. The lobbying part is a different thing, but some of us could help with that too. But I think that the recruitment part, I think this will help incentivize people. And so we let people know that this exists, and then we let people know who to contact, and then we let, you know, you have some kind of event, or we do it and we do the downtown.
That's what I was
you know,
gonna say.
street
So we
fair
just-
kind of
we
stuff.
just
The fire
approved
department's
it.
out there with a table and.
We just approved on June 24th, if you want to save the date, we're going to have a Dobbs downtown kind of sidewalk engagement event. Like, all the businesses can be out front of the storefronts, and of course, you all have the most prominent storefront in downtown Dobbs Ferry. So I was also going to just volunteer, maybe if Vinny, if Mayor.
It's accepted.
Yes, I'm volunteering. Maybe I could come and meet with you all and kind of download, because I don't know what all those benefits are. I could download all that with you and kind of work on like what that messaging is so we can get it into all those channels if we don't have bandwidth to do that elsewhere. So
reach out
I'll,
to you, we'll set
that'd
something
be
up
wonderful.
and-
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you all really for bringing these concerns, because, you know, you're all out there doing this, so, yeah,
Just a collaborative effort, because.
absolutely. Heard.
We're hurting. Ultimately, we're hurting, ultimately, it's gonna hurt the village and the taxpayers in this down the line.
Thank you for taking the time to come and share that with us.
So is there a motion to close the public hearing? Trustee Rosen-Asher, second. Trustee Patino, all in favor? The meeting is hereby closed. While I have it in front of me, let's just do it. Is there a motion to add to Chapter 273 of the Village of Dobbs Ferry Code to enact property tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers pursuant to Section 464-A of the New York State Real Property Tax Law? Trustee Rosen-Asher, second. Trustee Galen, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, guys, again for everything.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to resolution, courtesy of the floor.
Patty's gone.
Nobody online? Okay, good. All right, so let's move on to resolutions. Is there I just don't want to say that. So there's a motion to approve the Honeywell change order number 1 with regard to the window replacements. Richard, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, very briefly, as we noted, the village had entered into an energy performance contract, which has many components, one of which is replacement of windows here in Village Hall. And I know Trustee Patino has been working diligently with the contractor, and they've come up with, I believe, a solution to everyone's concerns about the windows. So I'll defer to Michael.
So for a little bit of context, the Honeywell contract, which was just under $4 million, included vinyl replacement windows throughout Village Hall. I worked with Honeywell to select an aluminum clad window, which is a historically appropriate profile. It's the type that it's one of the types that's approved by Landmarks Preservation Commission in New York City. It's a commercial window type, so it has a much longer lifespan. It's a much more attractive window, and the details are sort of similar to what's on the post office, and the post office is a building that's on the National Register of Historic Buildings. So it's in keeping with, improving our the idea that we lead by example, and we treat our building appropriately. So fortunately, all those additions came to just under $100,000, which I think is well worth the money. I just want to point out, we heard from a number of people in the community, architects, residents, who felt strongly that this was an important thing to do.
Okay, I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. I know it was a lot of, you have a busy business career, and to take time out of this, I know that was a lot to ask, and we appreciate it. I know that the change order is going to be in the amount of $98,000. Is there any questions or comments before I make that motion? Okay, so is there a motion to authorize a change order for the, let me finish. Is there a motion to authorize a change order for the energy performance contract project to install aluminum windows at Village Hall? Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee Sullivan, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Action number 2 is to consider a resolution authorizing the interim village administrator to sign professional services agreement with Emergency Vehicle Response to perform a fire department study and analysis. Richard, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. The fire department had come in and made a presentation to late last year, I believe, or early this year, about some of the facilities and some of the equipment that they've been working with. And there's a general sense that this is a good opportunity to really do a look-see from the very bottom up because of certain repairs that had to be made. It's an opportunity to look at siting different locations, but more particularly with the actual inventory of what the department is actually working with, what a highly functional department could use in order to make it operate that much more efficiently and productively. And so the department with the backing of the administration, reached out and obtained quotes from 3 different entities to actually make a empirical study. They provided them to you at the last meeting, and you indicated that you were agreeable with the lowest price study, which the department found to be acceptable. They were familiar with the professional and vendor, and it's their recommendation that you go forward. So that's what the resolution is.
Okay, and I know we have the proposal, the scope of the work order in front of us, and I think it's $22,800, okay. So is there a motion to authorize the village administrator to sign a professional services agreement with the Emergency Vehicle Response Company to perform a fire department study and analysis? Trustee Rosen-Asher, second. Trustee Rosenberg, all in favor. So we'll see how it goes, guys. It passes unanimously, okay? Action item number 3 is to consider a resolution authorizing the interim village administrator to enter into an agreement with Axon to acquire body-worn cameras for the police department. And I know we have a memo, I think, from the chief, and Rick, you can clarify me if we're wrong. We're going to get, I think, $70 in a grant, and then we're going to enter into an agreement with this company in the amount of
$70,000.
$245,000?
Approximately 245 to equip the entire department with body cameras. That does not include the $70,000 grant that we received from DCJS, so we dropped that price to about $170,000. The body cameras themselves, at this point, we've been looking at like July, possibly taking custody of the property. So payments will not be due right now, and then talking with Jeff through Axon, it could either be paid up front in one shot, or it could be broken up for the next 5 years, which is indicated in the quote.
When do you think this will be up and running? When will it be on people and working?
We received them midsummer, just finalizing policy for the officers and any contractual hurdles with Richard and the PBA.
And there's training involved, I'm assuming?
There's training, correct, but by the end of the year, no later, they would be up and running.
See, I thought September 1st, you're saying the end of the year.
I would like it, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the chief?
Not for the chief, but I would just note that this was one of the recommendations that came out of the police reform task force that the former governor had ordered us to do. And so I'm glad to see that another one of those recommendations is going to play. And I'm going to make my plea for another task force meeting that we get on the schedule in the next couple of months, so we can update the task force about everything we've done and where we're going, and then update the public at the same time.
You're right. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
is there a motion to allow the interim village administrator to execute an agreement to purchase Exxon body-worn cameras in the amount of $245,975.60? Trustee Rosen-Asher, second. Trustee Sullivan, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Action item number 4 is to consider a resolution to enter into an agreement with Legion Fireworks Company. So every July 4th, just about every July 4th, we've had fireworks. And this year is a very special time, a very special anniversary for us. So I think we've increased the budget on this, and this is for an amount of $24,000 for a firework display on July 4th at the waterfront. So is there a resolution to authorize the village administrator to enter into an agreement with Legion Fireworks for July 4th, 2023, in the amount not to exceed $24,000? Trustee Rosen-Asher, second. Trustee Rosenberg, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Action item number 5 is to consider a resolution authorizing the interim village administrator to enter into an agreement with the city of Yonkers for continued disposal of organic yard waste. Richard, you could just clarify me if I'm wrong, but this is something that we do every year, and they agree to take our organic waste. And I don't have in front of me, I can't find it, how much that does cost us, but there is a cost involved, correct?
Yeah, I'd have to defer to Stephen. Is that?
Actually, it's $22 per actual tonnage. Okay, there you have it.
They-
So is,
They have the transfer station there, and that requires permits for the DEC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they keep those permits in place and they allow the village to dispose through them, and then they have it hauled away.
okay, so is there a motion to authorize the village?
I have a question, actually. So what qualifies as organic yard waste? Is it like bags of leaves? Is it? Because those, Stephen, if I'm not mistaken, the regular garbage truck picks that up and commingles that with.
No, they pick it up after they're done with their garbage.
Oh, it's a second run? Oh, then I have no further questions.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Sorry, Stephen. Is so we can't compost that in our municipal composting situation? Gotcha.
Yeah, the volume is so
I
much
see.
larger, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If they cut a tree down and they have to dispose of stumps, it has to go to a DEC regulated transfer site.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Plus the composting you take someplace else anyway, right?
Food compost goes.
Yeah.
It's different,
Right. Right.
two different streams.
Okay, so is there a motion to authorize the village administrator to enter into an IMA with the city of Yonkers for the use of their organic waste yard? Trustee Taylor, second trustee Rosen Asher, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Action item number 6 is to consider a resolution to set a public hearing to consider a local law adopting historic standards. We had a public workshop on this issue. We went over the changes. I think we're all ready to go forward with it. Before we do, we must have a public hearing. So is there a motion to set a public hearing to consider a local law adopting historic standards? That public hearing will take place on May 9th, 2023. Is there a motion? Trustee Patino, second trustee Sullivan, all in favor? The public hearing is set. Is there a motion to approve the audit of claims as submitted and recommended by the village treasurer? Trustee Taylor, second trustee Patino, all in favor? That passes unanimously. I have to add on the motion regarding the garbage truck. So is there a motion to authorize the Department of Public Works to declare a garbage truck as surplus and to authorize the purchase of a new garbage truck in the amount of $307,072.90? Trustee Rosen Asher, second trustee Galen, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Let's do the liaison reports. Jessica, do you have anything?
Nothing.
Matt?
Nope.
Cole?
The camp sign-up has started for, I think, all the day and team camps for Dobbs Ferry Rec. Oh, if you want me to do that, that's fine. Sure. It's on Saturday at 9 a.m., starting at the high school. The Little League's doing their annual opening day parade. They're going to march down to Memorial for the grand opening of our new sod field, which I hear looks amazing. And I think there's going to be a Mayor's Cup again this year. And they had added things this year too. They have a coffee truck. I think they have a donut truck and, bouncy houses for the kids. So it's going to be a really big opening day.
That's Saturday?
Saturday.
Shari, do you have anything?
Just the seniors are having their PBA-sponsored senior party on April 26th with pizza and music and bingo. Everyone's invited. And that's from, what is it from? She sent me a text, and it's very tiny. It looks like it starts at 11. I don't know what it is, because I can't read it. That's all I have.
Mike, do you have anything?
I don't have anything for today.
Larry?
The STF is sponsoring another Dirt Fest on the 29th of April down at the waterfront. It was a great event last year. A lot of people came out, a lot of fun stuff for families to do, just helping to focus people on environmental awareness.
I think in addition to the Dirt Fest, there's the village-wide cleanup is the same day. So I think that's being put forth by the Beautification Committee, right. So it's a really good opportunity for everyone to get involved on that day in the village. So anything else from anybody?
You want to announce the kiosk? Are you going
Oh,
to start
yes,
to
that's
talk
right.
about?
So the
parking
kiosks, the
enforcement,
parking is finally ready pursuant to the chief who's promised. There won't be any hiccups at all. And this is the chief's cell phone number if you need it.
Any questions, anytime?
So we're going to roll it, it's going to become effective on May 1st. So as of May 1st, the parking will be enforced. We will put further information on our Facebook, on our website, and our newsletter. I think we've already made some significant outreach attempts, right? You've spoken to the seniors, and you've done other things as well?
Yes, that is correct. The town just did it with this to help us distribute that.
Okay.
And traders.
Okay. So thank you for that. That's, you're going to bring in some much-needed revenue for that, so thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we just need a motion.
an executive
Yeah,
session.
exactly. And advice of counsel. Very brief, though.
You've
That's
had,
what you always say.
no, this is not an invite, this is truly an executive session. These do not qualify for advice of counsel. There's only one small item that I need to advise you.
Okay, so we'll have to adjourn
But
this
this has to
meeting?
do with
Have to
staffing.
adjourn this meeting?
You have to ask for a motion to go in executive session for purposes of discussing qualifications of particular individuals leading to appointment.
Is there a motion? Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee Patino, all in favor?
And should any of these require action using public funds, you'll need to return back, take that action.